Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I am thrilled to have Luke Swain on the show. He goes by Vegas Refund on social media. He is a football and draft betting expert. Luke, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to chatting about the NBA draft. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you. As 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. Luke, I would really love to know more about your story. How did you get into betting, and how did you, in particular, decide to start betting on the NFL and the NBA draft?
I was living in New York and I was very into DFS, and there's a time frame when DFS went offline for like legal reasons, which
right. Yeah, I remember that.
They brought it offline because it was considered like gambling, which naturally when that went offline, it funneled me into sports betting for the first time. And I just loved it. At the time, I didn't love my job as much as I probably should have. And I was looking for something to get into. And that's when I started Vegas Refund. That's when I got into sports betting. And the Power Rank was actually like one of the first things I stumbled upon, probably via Google. I'm just looking into like how power ratings work, et cetera, which was almost 10 years ago. Power Rank's been probably around, as of course you would know, way longer. But it just took off from there, and then DFS went back online and it never went back.
That's awesome. The Power Rank's been around, it was certainly around 2014, so appreciate the kind words there. So tell me, like when you were playing DFS, were you playing pretty seriously? And how did those skills translate over into betting?
Yeah, it was pretty serious, and it was before, I want to say, like, I don't want to say like the bots, but the whale DFSers, where before you could see like users' records, and you could go against like a head-to-head with like a person, and not someone. I don't want to say they're not people, but like someone running an algorithm, and you probably have zero chance of winning.
Right.
Which now it's very difficult to win in DFS unless you have the means with the algorithms, et cetera. But it was fun. It wasn't. It was more a hobby, and then it got serious. Then it went offline,
right?
Which ironically led to betting. But draft betting back then, man, it was gold. It's kind of progressed as books have gotten smarter,
right?
But there's still a ton of opportunity, which we're definitely going to get into. Which NFL draft, NBA draft, NHL draft, MLB draft is a grind, but it's totally worth it.
That's awesome. So it's 2014. You're starting to get into sports betting. I presume you were betting football first, which you have done really well with over the past decade, right?
Yeah, so it was definitely football to start, and college, NFL and college football, naturally. Which then I moved to Jersey, and then at that time it wasn't legal, and you were betting like on the PPH's local books. A friend asked me what's a PPH. I just say basically like the mafia books, betting credit, which can get extremely dangerous. And I actually have the same PPH credit book today that I had a decade ago, which are hard to come by, and they're definitely more relevant in the Jersey area. But when everything came online legally, that's really when draft betting kind of took off. Even though it was available on the credit books, it just wasn't the same. And here we are now. Almost every state is legal.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think you can bet the draft in Pennsylvania, if I'm correct. If I'm not mistaken.
There's definitely specific states, like it's Jersey, Colorado, Illinois are like the three like big draft betting. Or Pennsylvania, you can't. New York, you can't. New York's prison in terms of like sports betting because you literally can't bet anything.
Right.
But those are the three main ones.
Yeah, we can definitely bet the draft here in Michigan.
Yeah.
I do think it's funny with PPH because it's what paperhead, which
Yeah.
I learned at a very late time as well. But like, I mean, it's just such a weird term. I think your term of mafia book makes a lot more sense. And certainly, if you got into betting in football a decade ago, like, or seriously doing it, like you had to go with those types of books.
Yeah, because it was like it was either that or like the Bovadas of the world, which like Bovadas are like good luck with that. Um, where if you can find a good PPH, like it can be just as good as illegal. It's extremely dangerous for the same reasons like credit cards are dangerous for people. Like you're basically betting with a credit card, um, and you have to settle up every week. But it's a lot easier to click submit when you don't have to deposit it if you're tapped out.
Right, exactly. And hopefully you know what you're doing, so
Yeah.
you're not paying too much. Luke, I wanted to talk to you about NBA draft betting. The NBA draft is next week. I think it's a particularly interesting one because there's no prohibitive favorite for the first pick. Maybe take us through your process for how you think about betting the NBA draft and maybe how it differs from the NFL and NHL.
Yeah, so like the main difference between the NBA and like the NFL and it kind of not actually and the NHL is really the NBA has become positionless where the NBA draft is more about like best player available. And with the NFL and to an extent the NHL, like positions have a huge factor where quarterbacks, guys like Kenny Pickett are going in the first round that if someone ranked as high as he was any different position, he'd be going like the second or third, which is something you can't really like their team needs, but you can't really like tangibly value. Where I mean, great example is this past draft. Penix went 8, Bo Nix went 12, and who was the
Yep.
other quarterback? And JJ
JJ
McCarthy went
McCarthy.
11. Where like in principle, like over under on quarterbacks, it's usually like 4.5, and in principle, like you're never betting the under because everyone says like the media is just hyping the quarterbacks and propping them up, and they never go where they're projected in terms of like the fringe guys. And this was the one year that they won in the first, and like that's just a great example of like the positional value in the NFL draft that you have to account for. Where in the NBA, there's really like it's positionless. Like it doesn't really factor into the process much. There's some one-offs where like a team might want a point guard, like Steven Castle is a great example this year, that might prop him up, but it really shouldn't go into your decision-making process whatsoever. Which is the NBA draft is my favorite to bet by far. It's just the simplest. It's less mainstream. Where the NFL, you have so much noise and smoke that you have to deal with, and everyone is betting into that market, and it's probably the most sensitive market that exists. They can they'll move lines off of anything because really the draft is betting the draft. You can get the answer to the test prior to the event. Where when you're betting an event like a live game, you might have the best bet in the world, but on the first play, the star quarterback goes down with an injury, and that bet's done. But really, if you know the answer to the test betting into the draft based off of like intel, whatever it is, really the commissioner just has to walk to the podium and it's done. There's really not as much variance unless you're like factoring in trades, which you probably shouldn't, to deal with by far.
Right. You mentioned how the NBA draft is positionless. I think we have Nikola Jokic to blame for that. 6'11", basically playing point guard for his team.
Right.
You've been betting the NBA draft for a while. So, I mean, have you seen a transition from when we actually cared that a big was a big, maybe with like Joel Embiid, to now where we're just, we're looking for the 7'4" guys that play like a guard? Has there been a transition in the NBA?
I wouldn't say like in terms of like betting into the draft, not so much. I mean, there's guys like in this draft, like I mean, there are some tough names to pronounce in this draft. So, and I'm notorious for butchering names, but like this is like there's a guy Yevis Missy, like that's definitely not how you pronounce it. He's out of Baylor and he's like 7'2" center, where he's basically getting propped up, and his stocks kind of come down based off of like the combine and shoot well. But like that size is definitely like going to keep him in the equation. Or like Kyle Filipowski,
Right.
on paper, like he's like he's a 7 foot wing or power forward or whatever it is, where he like based off athleticism, he probably shouldn't go in the first. But and this draft is like probably one of the worst drafts we've seen in a while. These are the guys that are just going to go in the first that probably wouldn't in other drafts because of their size. But books are getting smarter. NFL, the lines were pretty sharp. I mean, NBA so far is like the old days. Like there have been some really bad openers. Like DraftKings, DraftKings had openers on Monday, and what like Topic, Nikola Topic, who's had an injury concern towards ACL, I want to say last month. He was projected to go in like the top 5, and now he's going out of the top 10. And they opened his over under at 6.5, which I hit the over right away. And that was probably one of 2 of the worst over unders I've ever seen. Which the other was 2 years ago. Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia, his was like 12.5, which it should have been like 30. And it opened at 12.5 and it closed at like, I want to say 32.5. The topic was equally bad, and they pulled everything because they were all just bad. And they put him back up yesterday. I'm guessing the guy who set those lines probably got his privileges revoked, and they just had no one to post him again. But they actually weren't even that much better yesterday. But in terms of like the Joe kick aspect, I mean, probably the number one thing you want to do when you're betting in the draft is not have an opinion and really just go off of what other people that you trust are saying, because you're not the one making decisions. The key is to figure out what the decision maker is thinking and what they're going to do, which you want to factor in. NHL draft is probably the one draft that like you probably want to factor in size, which like if the guy is sub 6 feet, below 200 pounds, size actually has a huge factor into their draft stock, where you want like 6'1", 200 plus, which teams definitely value, specific teams. But NBA, I mean, everyone's tall. There's really not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real shocker that DK would have such a bad opener.
I mean, it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I hope they keep rolling them out. Like there was another one yesterday, Devin Carter, 11.5. That under I hit immediately. It's 10.5 now. 11.5 is like a very key number. 11, excuse me, is a very key number for him. But they're just off, which is great. I don't know what it is, but
that is awesome. So look, maybe take me a little bit more into your quantitative versus subjective process. You have offered the spreadsheet, which tabulates the results of various mock drafts in the NBA. This is like the most beautiful spreadsheet I've ever seen, with its color coding and the symbols, like, you know, like the logos for every team and like the flags and stuff. It's a work of art, really. But take me through that, and then actually let's just start there.
Yeah, so the starting like the spreadsheet that I do for every draft was kind of the key for me into this, where basically I just aggregate mock drafts from experts that I trust. In NFL, I keep track of how well they do in their mock drafts. With NBA, you just know who, in NHL, but I'm really just aggregating them and using a bunch of Google Sheet formulas to basically come up with like over-under percentages, and then also aggregating like big boards. And you can it gives you like a baseline for every player. That I want to say sportsbooks kind of caught onto this and are setting lines off of it too. Where for the NFL sheet, I actually caught a couple of sportsbooks buying it, and I actually refunded them. But it's a great baseline to have set. It's definitely not the key. It's probably like, I want to say 50% of my process, because you have these baselines for players based off of this spreadsheet where you have ranges, et cetera. And then you start reading the mock drafts from the guys that you trust, where the great part about NBA is I have like probably there's like 4 core guys, and then there's probably like 10 other mock drafters or experts that I value their opinion. Where with the NFL, it's like 30 plus for me, where you have like a core group, but then it's like 30 plus, and they're coming out every single day. There's so much smoke, and there's just a lot of variance. Where with NBA, it's a simple process, simple in terms of like who you should trust, and then you read through every mock, and this is probably the most important part of the whole thing is just going through the context of every mock, because there's nuggets in every pick that guys like Fassini, Wasserman, O'Connor, or Givney or Gavoni, excuse me, put that really are like the tipping points for me in terms of like making a bet or not, where they might put like a range in their context where he sees this guy going 9 to 14 and this guy's over under is 15 and a half. And if the sheet aligns and then you have that little nugget, like run to the table or run to the app to bet it. And then you can also like there's just a ton of nuggets in the context of every mock that are equally as valuable that you want to go off of. And each guy gives a bunch of mocks, and I manually enter in every mock on purpose. I could probably get it fed into the sheet, but I like manually updating it and seeing how much how much they're like falling or rising based off their previous mock. Where like Carrington's a great example, where Carlton Carrington out of Pittsburgh, Vicini, who's probably my number one guy in terms of whose opinion I value the most, he put Carrington at 12, and he had him in like the late 20s. And in the context, it was kind of leading on to a promise almost, where like the whole quote unquote promise in the NBA draft that these guys get is a whole different ball game. Like no one knows if they actually exist, if they're actually real. I get the sense that they are, but Carrington being so out of nowhere, Vicini putting him at 12, and in the context, he worked out, it went fantastic. You're hearing rumors, etc. Which DraftKings, you can bet exact pick up to 15 right now.
Oh,
And
wow.
I just threw a lotto ticket on Carrington to go 12, and it was 30 to 1, which like just throwing a few bucks on that, those are the fun ones, which
Yeah,
I definitely make
sure.
my money on the over-unders. And in the NFL draft this past a couple months ago, over-unders, I did fantastic. But the long shots, man, couldn't have been a worse year, because this year was just pretty chalky, which is good for over-unders, but you're not going to hit the long shots, which the mock drafters did fantastic. And the year before, the over-unders didn't go as well for the NFL, but all the long shots hit, because you had guys like Will Levis going in the second round that was projected to go in the top 5.
Awesome. Is there an NBA draft bet that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, so I mean, I harped on Nikola Topic opening up at 6.5 on Monday, which I hit the over, and now it's at 9.5, and I would still hit that over. I mean, I think it should be at least probably like 12.5 would be the right line. On my sheet, 92% to the over on Topic, and if you go by like the core 4, which is Vicini, Was, Gavoni, and O'Connor, like all 4 of them are on the over, which his range between those 4 is between 11 and 13. We've also seen mocks have him in the 20s, which like Kristen Peak just had him, I believe, in the 20s a couple days ago, who she's great from Yahoo. But it's just not high enough. And the over, I think, is still like minus 140, which is totally fair. So I would still hit that over 9.5 on DraftKings.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And then Carrington too. Carrington to go 12 if you want a long shot. It was 30 to 1 yesterday. It's 20 to 1 now. I still think that's a great bet in terms of like just fun. Like throw like 20 bucks on it or whatever, and you'll have a good time.
That sounds fantastic. So, Luke, this is kind of an interesting draft because it doesn't look like there's a definitive number one. You know, we have a couple French guys in Alex Sarr and Sakari Riasher that look to be the top pick. Although I was reading through some stuff and it seems like Donovan Klingon, the center from UConn, is like in the conversation to go number one. I'm kind of used to these NFL drafts where Caleb Williams is minus 1 million to go number one. It's a lot different with this NBA draft. Does that make it better or worse for you in terms of betting?
Yeah, so I mean, this is definitely a unique year where it's pretty bad. Like, there's just no consensus, like top guys. Where these guys, if like probably this general group in this draft, if you put these guys in last year's draft, they'd be going like 10 or later. But I mean, uncertainty definitely creates opportunity with the draft,
Right.
or else everyone would just be minus a million and there'd be nothing to bet into. So in terms of the uncertainty, like at the top of the draft or wherever we are, like this is, I enjoy it. I mean, greatest bet I've ever hit in terms of like just, I mean, money and odds. Like it was surreal. It was Paolo Banchero to go number one, where
Nice.
everyone,
Yeah.
I forget what his name, Jabari, whatever, whoever the guy
Mark
is.
Marker. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like number one. Waj was tweeting out his his indirect tweets where Jabari Parker is honing in on whatever like the Rockets are, and I just stuck to my guns. And it was a group of us that believed it was Paolo, and we were hearing it was going to be Paolo. And I mean, his odds were like 25-1, 30-1 a day before, and then all of a sudden draft day and like an hour before, and Waj was just wrong, and he's backstepping, and it hits. Which that's just like the uncertainty creates opportunity. Which like that's like a one in a lifetime type number one pick scenario. But Saar has been the favorite to go one. He hasn't had a workout with the Hawks yet. I guess it's based off his agent because they want him to play the five, but he wants to play the four. I don't know what it is. And
Does it matter?
Versace was like the other fave, but Klingon is definitely, his over is 3.5 right now, and you can't like, if you just want to go off of like mocks, it would be an over. But there's just so much smoke for him to go one or even three with trades, etc. That it's just unbettable. At this point, I think if Klingon's going to go one, a better bet instead of betting him to go one is to take Risacher. I don't even know how that you pronounce it, to go four, because it's pretty much assumed that if Sar doesn't go one, he's probably going to go two, and then three. The Rockets are either Reed Shepard's probably the strongest consensus right now, and if it's not Reed, it might be like Buzelis. And one of the two bigs isn't probably going to go three, and Versace would go four. But there's just a lot of uncertainty. I bet Klingon to go one weeks ago.
Wow. Nice.
But Reed Shepard's kind of becoming a consensus to go three. And then really, like, there's a consensus within the top six right now. I would say we know who the top six are. And then we know who in like somewhat the order, like Alex Sarr, Versace, Reed Shepard, Castle, Buzelis, and then Klingon. Like those guys are probably going to go top six, different order. And then there's probably another group up to 13 that the order could differentiate. And then it's just chaos after that. But there's like pretty much 13 guys that are becoming somewhat of a strong consensus to go in the top 13 picks. And then it's chaos, which books haven't opened up over unders outside of those 13 guys yet, which I'm hoping they do. But if I was to guess right now, I would say Versace 1, Sar 2, Shepard 3, and then probably, I mean, I think I'm just going to go with the consensus. Then Castle, Buzelis, and then Klingon maybe. Klingon might go 7. I mean, it's just Klingon is the landmine. He really is. Like whether he goes top 3 or not, really is going to tell us what happens in the top 10. And it's okay because I think he'll affect the order of the top 6, but I think the same guys are still going to go in the top 10, no matter where he goes, which is like the beauty of the NBA draft, because in the NFL, that would be chaos because of positional needs. Where like 2 years ago, like Witherspoon going to the Seahawks at 4 was like the landmine, and it pulled guys up and it pushed guys forward because teams that you saw going defense or needing a corner, all of a sudden Witherspoon, who you thought was going to go like probably like 7 to 8, isn't there, and he's dragging the next corner down because the team just needs a corner and they're going to take them. In the NBA, it really is best player available a lot of the time, which means like these guys are just going to go in the top 10.
I do a lot of looking at NBA mock drafts when I am preparing for March Madness because I want to have a sense of the ceiling for a lot of these players. I certainly remember at that point, Stephen Castle wasn't even coming out in the NBA draft. I was pretty sure he was going back because he's pretty raw, can't really shoot the ball. And Donovan Klingon was not. I don't even know if he was a first round pick. I think he was a first round pick, but he certainly wasn't in the conversation to go one or be like the consensus, like like the sixth pick by your numbers. So
Right.
obviously, a lot happened since the end of the season. So is it just that these guys are doing really well in their workouts? Like, I mean, how I don't even think Stephen Castle's a point guard.
Yeah.
I don't even think he played point guard. He didn't because Tristan Newton handled the ball for them. So maybe take us through how teams are like evaluating these guys.
Yeah. So like Klingon, I think his stock really rose through March Madness, especially in the national championship when he was going up against Edie.
Right.
And
Yep.
it's definitely a narrative with him that I'm seeing over the last couple of months that when guys like him are on such elite teams, like their opportunity to like show off their skills isn't there as much because everyone is so good on that team that when they go into the NBA, they can really like explode as like a high draft pick. So I think like the ceiling on Klingon, like defensively, I think teams are seeing being really high and seeing what he did in the national championship. And he crushed all of his workouts as well. And there was Stephen Castle, which yesterday there were some in the Twitter world of draft season, there were Stephen Castle to go one, which was like 100 to 1 at the time, which was kind of off of like the Trae Young trade rumors where Trae Young had like one of those tweets. It brings me back to like the tweets where like the snake in the grass, but Trae had like a hourglass tweet. And there are rumors of him getting traded, and of course everyone's like, "Oh, they're going to trade Trae Young and take Stephen Castle, number one, who Castle has limited all of his workouts to teams that he could play point guard for, which I think is like 40 to 1 now, which I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't throw a few shekels on Castle to go 1 at 100 to 1 because I'll never tell someone not to bet something like that because if it does hit and you're the one that told them not to, like it's on you. But Castle, like I think national championship, I think the team he played for, and I really think, I guess if one guy positional value is coming into play, it would be him in teams that want a point guard. He's really the only point guard in the top 10. Reed Shepard isn't a true point guard. Stephen Castle is really the only point guard for a team that needs one in the top 10 up until probably like maybe Devin Carter, who I don't even know if he's a true point guard. But like, this aspect, like the X's and O's isn't something like I'm privy to in regards to these guys. I really just don't have an opinion other than like what is making them rise
Sure.
and fall.
Sure.
But I think still Klingon and Castle are going to go in the top 6, I would say. But if Castle doesn't go, I'm assuming he doesn't go 1. If he doesn't go 4, he's probably going to go 6. So I don't see him going 5. And Matas Buzelis, if one name is connected to a team stronger amongst like the experts, it's him to the Pistons, almost as if like Reed 3 and Buzelis 5 are like they're making it out to like it's already happened. But both their over-unders are 5.5. And I think Matas has a chance to go through. I think he has a chance to go 3, 4, or 5. But I think Castle's really just, if he doesn't go 4, he's going to go 6, which that's why I wouldn't touch his over-under, which is really just based off the positional. But then there's like wild cards, like Cody, like the big risers, like Cody Williams, Devin Carter are probably the biggest risers who are projected like probably in like the 11, 12, 13 range. And now we're seeing them like Cody Williams could go 5. Wasserman was saying like if there's one guy that shocks the world to go top 5 would be Cody Williams. And then Devin Carter, like there's rumors of him having a promise in the top 10 and he could go as high as 7 or 8 as well. But the big followers are like Rob Dillingham, Nikola Topic, and then Ron Holland, who are all projected like in the 5 to 8, 9 range. And now, I mean, which I have all three of their overs. So as far as I'm concerned, they can go in the second round, but they're falling for reasons that, I mean, I think Ron Holland hasn't done very well in his workouts, maybe Dillingham as well. And then Topic he's just had some really bad luck.
Luke Swain, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving your expertise on the NBA draft. Please let everyone know where they can get your work.
Yeah, so Twitter, it's at Vegas Refund as well. And if you want to, the draft bets are in the 4for4 Discord, which I have the link to that on my Twitter as well. And then if you want to get access to the Google Sheet, which has the NBA draft and NHL right now, you just go to vegasrefund.com, which is linked on my Twitter as well. So,
and then the 4for4 is part of their paid service, right?
Yeah, that's it's just a 1 month. You can subscribe for the year or 1 month, which gives you full access to the website and Discord, which the Discord is fantastic. Their website's pretty sharp. I know the guys pretty well. It's the first time putting my plays in there, which I think generally for a sensitive market, it was well received instead of just tweeting them out to the followers and blowing up a market. But it's $50 on the 4for4 website, which is not that much compared to what it was for the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. And then the spreadsheet is also a paid product?
Yep, so that's $35, which you'll get the MLB draft as well included in that, which the spreadsheet is, if you want to bet into the draft, I could not recommend it more. It has been a difference maker for me, and I hope other people. And also, if you're not betting on the draft, I think, and you're into the draft, I think it would be valuable to use as well. But it's grid visual. If you're a visual learner, there's a grid that breaks it down by pick, by percentage of the player, and then hot, cold, stock markets, and then a odds dash. All in Google Sheets.
It looks pretty cool. And for the NBA, so I know in the NFL, everyone comes out with their last mock, like Thursday before Thursday night of the first round. Does that happen with the NBA as well? And then you're going in there, like you said, and changing the numbers and seeing how things change?
Yeah, so the NBA, I would say we just have like the second to last round of mocks and probably the last mock. And there's a lot less mock draft guys. So it will probably be Monday, Tuesday. I doubt it would be Wednesday because the draft's on Wednesday, the first round. Then the NHL draft's on Friday. But I would guess it would be like probably Tuesday, the main guys. And then we'll probably get like the final rankings on Monday. So these guys put out their big boards, which are extremely important for the same reason that we talked about, like a positionless draft in a positionless league. How they rank these guys and aggregating them is extremely important. So I would say like their final rankings would come out Monday, and then their final mocks will probably come out Tuesday, Wednesday, hopefully Tuesday.
Awesome. Luke, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show podcast. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Just a reminder, you can get my free sports betting newsletter. Check that out at thepowerrank.com. I'm on vacation next week, but we will get some shows back in the month of July as we head into the 2024 football season. Have an awesome day.